Hello and welcome to the Mini Sculpting Super Show. This is the place where you come to learn how to sculpt miniatures. We just talk about collecting miniatures, designing miniatures, basically anything that has to do with miniatures. So today, this is the first episode of the rebranded, renamed, whatever this is I'm doing for my channel. I really wanted it to have a fun name, kind of like an old 90s cartoon or something like that. So that's what I came up with. So today is kind of the inaugural episode, and we will be going over starting a new series called 15 millimeter figures. So in this series, I'll go over the whole process of sculpting a 15 millimeter size miniature from start to finish. So yeah, and many of these techniques can be used for whether you're doing 15 or otherwise. So, but they can be tricky. They're extra small. Miniatures are obviously small regardless of their size, typically. Yeah, there's some handy tricks that'll make sculpting 15 millimeter miniatures even easier after you watch these videos. So, all right, let's get to the tutorial.
In order to sculpt 15 millimeter miniatures, you need similar tools to 28, 35, whatever. So you need your pliers, snips, and this wire here. But a big difference is you want to make sure you have a thin wire. This that I'm using is a 28 gauge brass wire. It's very flexible, but at this size ends up being plenty sturdy. So I start by cutting two pieces of wire, and I made them, I think, 50 millimeters and 40 millimeters long. And you want to make that sure they're a little extra long, especially in the arms. Normally I tend to make, I think the longer piece for a 28 is, or 35 millimeter figure is with the legs, because you've got to do the head, the spine, the legs, and have something to be held on to in the miniature base stand. But in this case, as I'll explain a little later, while you do need a little extra to go into the base for the figure, you definitely need more for the arms, and I'll get into that in a minute. So right here, what I'm doing is this is for the legs. You want to create a loop, and you want to make it as tight as possible to begin with. I think I kind of made mine a little too large at the beginning, and then you want to spin it a few times. I should say, I forgot to mention that what I'm making here is a goblin, a little 15 millimeter goblin. So he'll actually be a little smaller than 15 millimeter. But you start the legs by making that loop, spinning it a little bit so you have a nice core begun. But what you're doing here is you're actually making about half of the spine and the legs. You feed the other wire through, and this will become the top half of the torso or spine, the head, and the arms. You could build the armature exactly like you would with the larger figures that I've shown before, but this is a technique that a fellow sculptor who specializes in 15 millimeter figures showed me. His name's Roderick Campbell, and this basically what happens here is it seems a little fragile and it's wobbly. As you can see that the wire's moving around. Once you tighten it up, it gets a lot better. Anyways, but the reason you do this is if you bring the two wires together like this, there is essentially no bulk created by the arm wire like there is in the normal miniatures when you have to wrap it around the spine. Alright, so I'm just tightening it up a little bit. Now, I can tell you right now, I made it too long, and that's why I just unspun it some, because I knew it was going to be way too large for the figure I was doing. And I should also point out that you should, especially if this is your first time, I was eyeballing this, but you will definitely want to get the armature reference cards that I put up on a previous video, or you can get a link to if you support me on Patreon, so you know the sizes you're going for. So anyways, once you finish looping around the top wire, that's what I'm working on right now, you want to pull the arms straight out so it's kind of creating the shoulder area. what we're going to do is we're going to take one of the arms and we're going to loop it around and to create a head. So you basically end up having one arm go straight up right there, and then you start bending it over to create a little loop, little nub. You don't have to make it super long because you can always build up more putty to raise it up higher if you need more room, but you just need to get something there for the putty to stay in place and hold. So you loop it around, and I like to make it loop around the back, so that again that any slight extra bulk there might be would be kind of on the back more than the front. You pinch it together nice and tight on the sides and the front and back, and there you go. You can see now I've got head little head looped, and I've got the shoulders sticking straight out. And then I think I'm just checking this spine and head length real quick to see if I need to unwind it anymore, but I think it's pretty good. Yeah, it's about, what was that, 6 or 7 millimeters tall overall? 6. Okay. Yeah, this goblin I think ends up being maybe 11 millimeters tall. Alright, then you just bend the legs down, very similar to how we do larger armatures. I think in this case, I'll tell you a tip here, I made them a little too wide at first, so rather than actually bending, having the legs go out to the side and then you bend it out from the spine and then straight down so you end up with that width. If you were doing a wider figure, that's great, but since this is going to be a smaller character, I would say for humans or small goblin type things, you actually don't want to have the hips go straight out and then the legs go down. You want to actually just kind of create a little Y shape with them, and then accept that you might need to make the spine just a touch shorter to make up for that, and that lets you have a gradual turnout and you going out of the wires. Right here, what I did, I put just a little tiny dab of glue on the 2 loops that join together, and as you can see now, it's not wobbling around at all. There's hardly any glue, but it's just enough to keep it steady. And here I think I'm adjusting the legs like I was mentioning. See, makes it a little bit nicer there. For the arms and shoulders, you want to do the same thing, but just I got it started by bending out from the spine, but then I came back in. Oh, I almost lost it. Came back in and bent it down. Created the shoulder a little closer to the spine. There. And as I said, this brass wire is extremely easy to bend, which is nice, but at this size, when you pose them up, it's actually plenty strong. If you were to build, excuse me, if you were to build a 28 or 30 millimeter, 35, whatever type miniature out of this stuff, 1, the brass is more flexible, and 2, it being so thin, you could do it, but I would definitely use putty the whole way, and you would have a lot of problems with the bending. So, but at this size, if there's too much tension, it can just be so hard to bend it. It's nice to have this more softer material. Alright, so right here I've got a black rubber stopper. You can use cork, you could use a small miniature stand. I like to use these because they're so small and they're heavier. And you get these at any hardware store. What I'm doing here is I'm taking just a piece of packing tape, or you can do masking tape, whatever, or not masking tape, Scotch tape, and placing it on there, and then I just trim it down to size. And the reason I do this is the black rubber stopper gets a little chewed up, and kind of like cork can. I don't know, I just like having this smooth surface. This essentially kind of mimics the same thing as having green stuff on the base. And the reason why I don't coat it with green stuff, it makes it a little easier to pop the figure off at the end, is every time I do a figure, you need to puncture on this some holes like this in the black rubber. And what's cool also about this stuff over cork for me is because it's a denser material. When you push the wire in, even though you've sliced it, the rubber tends to want to push back in on itself, so you get a fairly good hold. So had to trim down the legs a bit more because they were they were going to stick in a little too far into the base. You'll have to test it. So you just start by putting the wire in. Make sure you use the pliers, and you want to grab it as close to the tip, to the ends as possible, and just slowly move it down. I think I didn't cut them quite short enough, so you might see that I get stuck and I have to pull it out. I can't remember if I recorded that or not. Yep. So you see, I made them a little too long, and they got pretty wobbly. So I just stabbed a little deeper. I think I trimmed a little off. And just straighten it all back out so they got all bent up because they started hitting the end of the openings I created. Goes in much easier now. And I just kind of did a excuse me, I just kind of spread the legs a little bit apart. I had a little bit of an idea of how I want this guy to go. You might also notice I made his arms, they're definitely pretty long for his body, but that was intentional. I wanted to have him with kind of short, stubby legs and lankier arms. So now I'm just doing the final positioning to figure out his final height, which I think is going to be about 11 millimeters. As always, you want to make sure you're getting your dimensions based on the guy standing totally up straight. Nope, looks like 10.
All right, so that wraps up this episode, the first episode of the mini Sculpting Super Show. I hope you enjoyed watching it, and stay tuned until next time. I'd like to give a big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon who are supporting and helping bring these videos to life. Their support really helps me be able to commit more resources and time and up the type of equipment I'm using, things like that, to bring you guys even better videos. So go on there, check it out, like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, so you can get updates on when the new ones come out. All right, I'll see y'all next time, and keep sculpting.